Sometimes in life, we think we have all the time in the world. We postpone dreams, delay happiness, ignore the things that truly matter. We tell ourselves, I'll do it tomorrow. But tomorrow has a strange habit. It quietly turns into never. Today's story is about a professor, a simple glass jar, in a classroom full of students. What he did that day looked like a small experiment, but the lesson he taught stayed with his students for the rest of their lives. Because in the end, life is not about how much you fit into your time. It is about what you choose to put in first. One morning, a philosophy professor walked into his classroom, carrying a large glass jar. The students looked up with curiosity. Instead of opening his textbook, the professor placed the jar on the desk in front of him. Then he took out a bag filled with large rocks. Without saying anything, he started placing the rocks into the jar one by one. Soon, the jar was filled to the top with big rocks. The professor looked at the class and asked, "Is the jar full?" The students looked carefully. The rocks reached the top of the jar. "There's no more space," one student said. "Yes, it's full," the class agreed. The professor simply smiled. Then he reached under the table and pulled out another bag. This one was filled with small pebbles. Slowly, he poured the pebbles into the jar. The tiny stones slipped between the spaces of the larger rocks. He gently shook the jar, allowing more pebbles to fall deeper inside. Then he asked the class again, "Is the jar full now?" The students began to understand that something interesting was happening. Some of them smiled and said, "Probably not." The professor nodded. Next, he took out a container filled with sand. He slowly poured the sand into the jar. The sand flowed into the tiny spaces between the rocks and pebbles. Soon, the jar looked completely packed. Once again, he asked, "Now, is the jar full?" This time, the students laughed. "Yes," they said, "now it's definitely full." But the professor had one last surprise. He reached under the desk and pulled out 2 cups of coffee. The students watched with amusement as he slowly poured the coffee into the jar. The liquid filled the remaining spaces between the grains of sand. The classroom burst into laughter. Then the professor looked at his students and asked, "What do you think the lesson of this experiment is?" One student raised his hand and said, "It shows that no matter how busy your schedule is, you can always fit more things into it." The professor smiled gently and shook his head. "That's not the real lesson." He paused for a moment before continuing. "The real lesson is this. If you don't put the big rocks in first, you will never fit them in later." The classroom suddenly became quiet. The professor pointed toward the jar. "The big rocks represent the most important things in your life: your family, your health, your dreams, the people you love, the moments that truly matter. If those were the only things in your life," he said, "your life would still be full." Then he pointed to the pebbles. "These represent the other important things, like your job, your house, and your daily responsibilities." Finally, he pointed to the sand. "The sand represents everything else: small worries, distractions, endless busy tasks." Then he looked directly at the class. "If you spend all your time filling your life with sand, you will never have room for the big rocks." The students sat quietly, thinking deeply about his words, because many of them had been filling their lives with things that didn't really matter: endless scrolling, unnecessary stress, constant busyness, forgetting the people and dreams that truly mattered. Just as the professor was about to leave, one student raised his hand and asked, "But professor, what does the coffee represent?" The professor smiled warmly. "It means that no matter how full your life may seem, there is always room for a cup of coffee with someone you care about. The lesson from this story is simple. Life will always fill itself with tasks, responsibilities, and distractions. But if we do not make space for what truly matters, those things may never fit into our lives. So remember this: take care of the big rocks first. Spend time with the people you love. Protect your health. Follow your dreams. Because the sand will always find its way in, but the big rocks only fit when you choose them first. And maybe today is a good day to ask yourself one simple question. What are the big rocks in your life? And are you giving them the space they deserve?